why there is no VSync, and even then it is stuttering frames like crazy. The Xbox One, well, the original one we're talking about, not the Xbox One S or the Xbox One X, or not the Series S or the Series S. Yeah, Microsoft's names are really, really good for their systems if you couldn't tell. So the original Xbox One launched in November of 2013, and to say it was a bad launch would probably be a bit of an understatement. I'm sure all of you are more than aware of just how terrible this launch was, but if you're not, well.
We're sitting there listening to it the whole time, and I remember one of our engineers said, like, they're not even talking about any of the games yet. Are they gonna talk about games?
With Kinect, we made you the controller.
This is human control for a human experience.
It was all about entertainment, even a partnership with Steven Spielberg, and they showed a TV guide at the reveal event. I mean, that was really like the vision.
This is the beginning of truly intelligent TV. Xbox, watch TV.
You said television. We wanted to hear video games.
You know, we showed a few games, but core gamers were left unsatisfied.
We're all in the green room, and as each person would get off stage, you know, the execs in the room would ask what the pulse is on social, and it was not good.
This is not going well. This is not going well at all.
There were hypercuts released minutes after the initial unveiling of the Xbox.
Watch TV. TV remote.
TV, TV.
Television, TV, television.
That was not the right way to unveil the next generation of gaming.
Yeah, so now that you're caught up, it didn't launch very well, but as a console, it was actually pretty decent. It still was a bit slower than the PS4. The PS4 had a better GPU. I think the CPUs were about the same. It was a bit more gaming focused, because the Xbox seemed to be a lot more focused on multimedia and on gaming, not just gaming, which is baffling to me because Sony tried that with the PS3, and we all know how well that went for the PS3. So the fact that Microsoft thought, oh, they'd take a stab at it, even though it's failed for Sony, I don't know. But anyway, that was back then. So now, 8 years later, what can it do? Well, as you'll find out, not that much really. But anyway, let's get into the games. The first game we'll try is Forza Horizon. Hopefully you can hear me over the car. But yeah, as you can see so far, obviously, because it's a 360 game and it's been optimized by the Xbox team to work backwards compatibly on the Xbox One. So far, 30 FPS. Seen absolutely no frame drops of any kind. Although as far as I know, the Xbox team did want to make it as authentic as possible. So you might actually see some frame rate stutters, but that's because it would have been on the 360 itself, again, to keep it as accurate as possible. But this game still looks really good. I mean, keep in mind, this is running on this was a 360 game, and this came out in 2012. So that's literally almost 10 years ago now. For a 10-year-old game, this is looking very good as I crash into someone's house. One thing that you will notice when playing it is that nothing's really destructible. Even like, say, for instance, like a fence post like this is destructible. Okay, that kind of defeats my point, but for instance, like obviously any of these walls or anything, yeah, you cannot get through them whatsoever. But yeah, as you can see, completely stable 30 FPS. Maybe occasionally it will go under, but it's not something that you really notice. So if it's mainly just for 360 games that you want to buy an Xbox One for, or at least the backwards compatible ones, then this will work fine. Again, the main issue if you do want to buy this, mainly for 360 games, is only about half the library or so is supported, I believe, because just recently the team decided that they'd ported enough games, but they were going to basically stop porting any more games over. I think the main issue is because of licensing. Not necessarily that they don't want to, but more of it's really hard to get a hold of some of the older 360 games or some of the more niche games. So only really half the library supported. So you'll have to double check if all the games that you've bought are actually compatible before you get the Xbox. Obviously, if it's not, you may as well just get the 360 still. But for any of the games that are supported, they should run really well, and they have been optimized to make sure that they run well on the hardware. Unlike, you know, PC emulators where there's a good chance that even a game that should work, like a first-party exclusive, may not. It's really cool that Xbox have done this, because besides PC, there isn't really any other way to play 360 games. Oh, and the 360 itself. But especially with what happened to the launch of the 360, where all the consoles were basically just dying as soon as they left the factory. Really important to preserve a lot of these games. Although again, there is a significant amount of input lag. I think this is more of the console than the actual game itself. Actually, even some of the later Forza Horizon games have had some issues. But yeah, yeah, like, I find it much harder to go into a corner. It's probably because it's at 30 FPS as well, isn't it? But I find it much harder to actually drive around corners when I think I'm turning and I'm actually not. Overall, Xbox 360 games run pretty well, in my opinion. The next game we'll try is Myst. Open the door. Oh, wow, yeah, okay, the graphics don't look that great. Why, you send me a picture of a dog? Yeah, as you can see, a modern game, especially one very graphically orientated like Myst really is struggling on the Xbox. Like, I wasn't expecting the resolution to be great. Like, the resolution actually isn't too bad. Like, the graphics, you can still hold up relatively well. But yeah, the frame rate is dying. It is not having a good time at all. Because I've played this a lot on my laptop as well, and that's got DLSS through the graphics card, and that makes it a lot better than it would be otherwise. But even then, this is still usually a pretty easy game to run as it's on the Unreal Engine. But as you can tell, this is where you start off the game, and even here, you're getting regular frame drops. Considering you cannot find a Series X anywhere, this might be your only option, so this really isn't great. But it is still playable, like, just. But yeah, the graphics don't look too bad. Texture resolution definitely has gone right down. Like, if I go right up to here, yeah, you can tell, compared to playing on like a proper laptop. But again, for an X-Bone game, it's not too bad. What about if I go in like some of the indoor areas? Let's see how that works. Oh wow, running makes it even worse. Yeah, not much better indoors really. Is it using some kind of upscaling? I think it might be using kind of upscaling because it does look a bit fuzzier than it would otherwise. I don't even think this is holding 30 FPS. This feels more like 25 at times. Yeah, this is actually a really good game. So if you do have Game Pass on Xbox or Windows, I recommend giving it a shot. Yeah, the performance really is not great on the OG Xbox One. So the next game I wanted to try is Forza Horizon 5 because that's one of the latest games, not only from just like it came out only a couple months ago, but also it's a first party exclusive. So it should, in theory, run better on the Xbox than it would on, say, PC and especially in other platforms. So it should be much better optimized. And to be fair, it is running relatively well. Like, I had a few issues with it on PC when it literally first came out, but it's definitely running better on the Xbox. Although I can also notice there's a lot less foliage and there's a lot less detail and stuff. Like, there's a lot more popping. But again, considering that they had to develop for literally, what, 5 consoles and PC, this is actually running not too badly, to be honest. For some reason, again, as you see, like, this definitely does not always stick to 30. Like, some of the older games will quite easily stay at 30 FPS, if not, well, I was going to say if not higher, but it wouldn't go higher. But very rarely did I see any frame drops, but now I'm really starting to see more because, I mean, this hardware is almost 10 years old now, so as you can imagine, it's really going to struggle. But again, it does look very visually nice. It looks a lot better than it has any right to on a console like this. Although, again, I don't know if, I think it's just the Xbox in general, but I'm using a standard Xbox One controller wired, and I'm getting a lot of input lag. Like, I'm literally getting about half a second or so of input lag. Like, I'll try and show you. I don't know how well you can see that, but there is quite a bit of input lag, which for a racing game isn't great. I'm not sure if that's just because it's 30 FPS or if that's the console itself. Either way, yeah, that's definitely not great. The way that Playground Games have done the motion blur means that it looks a lot better, even when the frames do drop than you would think it does. But again, when a racing game, when you need as much precision as possible to get into the last, 50 milliseconds or whatever, then having input lag and motion blur is really not great. Again, it does look quite well visually, but in terms of actually then playing the game, it is quite difficult. Especially when you go around like corners and stuff, I do notice a couple of frame drops, like even the menus. But like, see, like even the menus stutter a little bit. So overall, not a terrible experience, but definitely not ideal at all. Yeah, as I've been playing it more, I don't know how well you can tell from that, but especially in the town, yeah, it is regularly dipping below 30. Ow. I don't know how much below 30 exactly, but it is really, really struggling. Because not only the input lag, but also the dropping frames means that it is really hard to control it. So considering it can still play a modern game, even if play is in quotation marks, it's pretty impressive, but still, like, unless you have to play it like this, I really wouldn't recommend it. So last of all, I thought I'd just quickly boot up Control, and at the moment, yeah, I didn't realize just how low resolution the game is. Like, it looks quite blurry, especially looking at the floor. You can see all the aliasing, and I was like, wow, okay, fair enough. And also the motion blur isn't the best, but again, like, it is definitely running. It is struggling, to say the least, but it is working if you just want to play it and don't care how much you have to sacrifice. I mean, you could also also play it on the Switch, but then that's also being streamed, so this is the only way to play it offline. But even then, if you're doing it through Game Pass, you can't really do it offline anyway, so you can only do it offline if you've at least logged in. So if your internet goes down, you can still play it, but even then you can't really. But yeah, to be fair, like, the level of detail is pretty good. Like, there's still a lot of objects and stuff in the background, so that's pretty good. But then as a result, the resolution kind of gets sacrificed. Yeah, I haven't really played much more than just the beginning stages, but it is definitely working. Obviously, this is probably the best case scenario, so it will get worse and worse as we go along, but again, it's actually not that bad. It is playable, which for a console that's 10 years old and wasn't great to begin with, is not bad at all. And again, it runs natively, unlike the Switch, which can't even run it natively. So yeah, not running too bad at all. Finally, we'll give this random game I found on Game Pass called Deer Simulator a go. So I was just going to wait a little bit. I was going to play the game a little bit just to get a general feel of the performance. And then I just moved the camera. Why? There is no VSync, and even then it's stuttering frames like crazy. Wow, okay. Like, I remember playing this on PC and I'm like, for some reason, it'd be like, you know, 120 FPS or whatever, fine. It was fine when I was moving the camera, but when I moved the character, the frame rate dropped to like 60 or something, and it was really, really broken as it is. Like, I know that the point of the game like this is to be broken, but I mean, it's not supposed to be this broken. Like, this is barely even playable. Like, again, if you absolutely have to, you can play this, but these kind of games are supposed to be jank in a fun way, not in a, I actually don't know if I can even play the game kind of way. I mean, I can get some stuff done, but the performance is, I'm not going to be, like, nice about it. It's just terrible. I'm not necessarily saying it's the developer's fault. I have no idea how the development went on this, but yeah, the performance on this Xbox is just terrible. It is not good at all, and that's factoring in the fact that this kind of game is supposed to be like broken and be glitching for the sake of being funny. So when I run, he does this, and I can also do that as well. I can dance with him. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of game that I'd actually like to play if it wasn't so broken and impossible to play, because I actually quite liked Goat Simulator, even though that was like a joke game. I actually thought I was going to play this just to have a joke and be like, oh well, here's a game that will run fine. And yeah, it actually kind of doesn't. So that was a bit unexpected. Unfortunately, it's not going to be as organic as when I first found this out, and because the camera only shoots at 30 FPS at the moment, you probably can't tell, but this is actually running at 60 frames per second. Now, if you didn't know, Forza Horizon 4 only runs at 1080p 30 on the original Xbox One. So when I found out that it was running at 60 FPS, I was very shocked, to say the least. So this is through the Microsoft Xbox Cloud Streaming, I think they call it now. It used to be called xCloud, but they call it like Cloud Stream, so I'm just going to call it xCloud from now on. And yeah, essentially, instead of installing the game, you have the option to just literally, it's just called play, and then it does it through streaming. So as long as your console have a really good internet connection, ideally wired, though it can work relatively well on wireless, but obviously wired is going to be a lot more stable and much better. As long as you have a decent internet connection and the game is supported, you can literally just stream the game. Not only do you not have to install it, which could save you at least an hour on a game like this, maybe even up to a day, depending on how your internet connection is, but also you could literally play it at a higher FPS. It's absolutely mad to me. And yeah, it's just amazing that you actually have the option, because normally you'd have to buy at least the Xbox One X or the Series X in order to have the option between frame rate and resolution. I think on the Series S you do have that choice as well on certain games, but again, it's rare to say the least. But the fact that I can actually just, on the original Xbox One, I can boot up Forza Horizon and be like, oh, I want to play on high frame rate today. Now, yeah, obviously when you're playing it, it looks a lot like a YouTube video, right? So you can definitely tell there's compression artifacts, and it doesn't look nearly as sharp as the original downloaded. Again, the fact that I can just choose between, oh, today I feel like playing at a higher frame rate, or I want to, play it, I want it to be more responsive, or, oh, you know what, I actually want to take in all the visuals and I want it to look really nice. The fact that you have that choice is great. And again, if you're somebody who's like, for instance, you're not that big of a fan of a game like this, and you're just playing it because you got a bunch of friends that are, instead of having to download it, you can just quickly jump in, you can play with your friends and then jump back out. And that might not seem that important to some people, but considering how the original Xbox One, and I think even the Xbox Series S, they both only have a 500 gig hard drive and SSD respectively in them, and even then that's not the actual full, all of that is usable. In reality, it's more like 300 to 350 gigs usable. And considering a game like Forza Horizon 5 is over 100 gigs now, that is next to no space. 300 gigs goes a lot quicker than you would think it does. And so being able to stream it instead of having to install it, as well as it actually being at a higher frame rate, is actually a fantastic feature. But again, the main downside is, well, obviously you have to be subscribed to Game Pass Ultimate, which you may not be able to afford, and you need really good internet as well. But assuming you do, like for instance, if you do have really good internet but you just cannot find a Series X or a Series S anywhere, then this is a surprisingly decent option. I'm enjoying it quite a lot. I was completely blown away that this was running at 60 FPS, and unfortunately I've checked in the menus and I don't think there's any way to change between resolution and frame rate, but considering you're streaming it, you probably won't notice the higher resolution anyway. But yeah, the fact that you have the option, again, that's fantastic. Smashy smash. So now what I've done is I've taken out the Ethernet cable and I've just gone back to Wi-Fi, and so I thought while I'm here I may as well just test the latency and the connection on the rest of it. And from what you can tell here, what it says is the upstream really isn't great. So in other words, the game stream will probably run a lot worse, and if you want, you can just pause the video and read it all if you want. So I thought let's try it on Wi-Fi just to see how well it runs. As I said, optimally you'd be running it through a network cable or through Ethernet cable, but we may as well try it through Wi-Fi to see if it's actually a pretty good solution or if there's another dependency. Well, already it took quite a bit longer to get into game than it did on the Ethernet cable, and yeah, so I'm on Wi-Fi now. I think it's about 30 megs down and like 10 megs up, something like that at the moment. It might be worse than that, but as you can, okay, at the moment it's not too bad. Yeah, definitely on Wi-Fi it does get worse. When I was loading in, it was significantly worse, but now that it has loaded in, like there is the occasional stuttering, but again, crashing into a tree there. Hang on. But it's actually not too bad. Like I was expecting it to be worse. I was expecting it to like just completely die, unless your internet is like atrocious, which at that point you've probably come to terms with not being able to utilize game streaming. Then you can at least get a pretty usable experience out of this. Oh no, flip. Ooh. So that's the video. Overall, I'm actually quite surprised with what the Xbox One can do. It's still not nearly as good as even the PS4, let alone obviously the PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and the new consoles. But then considering how literally impossible it is to find any of those, I have one, but even then, it's not actually mine. It's just that my brother managed to find a guy who just happened to have one. It's like, it's not even like we intended to buy it. It's just looking at ourselves, it is impossible to find a PS5 or a Series X. I have seen a couple more Series X and especially Series S. I found a lot of those recently, but at the same time, I'm not in much in need of those. But regardless, considering how impossible it is to find next-gen consoles or decent gaming computers at this point, having something like the Xbox One, it's not great on its own. It struggles to do even like 720p, let alone 1080p in a lot of cases. But considering how you have the game streaming on it, you can stream your game from Microsoft servers, from the cloud onto your console. So you could essentially get like a Series S, Series X experience, as long as you have a decent internet connection, of course. Along with the fact that it's got standard media stuff, so it's got Netflix, it's got YouTube, it's got Amazon Prime, all the rest of it. You know, for the time being, if you're either stuck with one of these consoles or you just happen to find one pretty cheap, it's really not that bad of an option these days. As long as you don't play the latest and greatest games. Like, you might be able to get away with something like Forza Horizon, but as we saw, games like Myst, especially that Deer game, that was horrible for some reason. That performed really, really poorly. Even Control did pretty well. I mean, I was quite surprised with just how well that ran. So overall, as long as you limit your expectations very heavily and try not to play the latest games, you can still get away with a decent amount on the Xbox One. Anyway, if you liked the video, you know where the like button is, and keep gaming, I guess. I'm also just adding this in quickly, but I can't believe how I didn't think about this. So the other day, I went and got two shirts. I got an Xbox and a PlayStation shirt. And as you can see here, I can't believe I filmed this entire video and didn't even wear this shirt. Like, come on, it's literally Xbox related. Like, I'm pretty gutted about that, but oh well. At least you can kind of meme about it now. So